The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, and Dana Zimmerman stepped into the marble lobby of Harrison Global Industries, with her portfolio clutched against her chest, and her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone in the building could hear it. She had exactly 15 minutes to convince one of the wealthiest men in commercial real estate that her interior design firm deserved the contract for his newest luxury hotel project. And she was terrified she would stumble over her own words the moment she opened her mouth. The receptionist, a polished woman with perfect posture, gestured toward the conference room. "Mr. Harrison will be with you shortly." Dana nodded, forcing herself to breathe slowly as she walked down the corridor. The walls were lined with photographs of buildings that reached toward the sky, architectural marvels that bore the Harrison name. She had studied every single one of them last night, memorizing the details until her eyes burned from exhaustion. This opportunity could change everything for her small firm, the one she had poured every penny and every sleepless night into for the past 3 years. When she entered the conference room, she barely had time to arrange her presentation boards before the door opened again. The man who walked in made her forget whatever she had been about to say. Yates Harrison was tall, probably 6'3", with dark hair that looked like he had run his fingers through it one too many times today. His suit was immaculate, charcoal gray and perfectly tailored, but what struck her most were his eyes. They were an unusual shade of amber, warm and intelligent, and when they landed on her, she felt the full weight of his attention. "Miss Zimmerman," he said, extending his hand. His voice was deep, confident without being arrogant. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice, Mr. Harrison." She shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the calluses that suggested he did more than just sit behind a desk. "I appreciate the opportunity." He gestured for her to sit, then took the chair across from her rather than at the head of the table. It was a small thing, but it made the space feel less formal, more collaborative. "I have to be honest, your firm was not on my original list. But when I saw the work you did on the Riverside boutique hotel renovation, I had to meet you." Dana felt warmth spread through her chest. The Riverside had been her first major project, the one that had nearly bankrupted her when the original investors pulled out halfway through. She had finished it anyway, working 18-hour days and calling in every favor she had. "That project was personal to me. The building had so much history, and I wanted to honor that while bringing it into the modern era. You succeeded." Yates leaned back in his chair, studying her with those amber eyes. The blend of vintage charm and contemporary luxury was seamless. "That is exactly what I want for the Meridian." For the next hour, Dana walked him through her vision for his hotel. She showed him mood boards, fabric samples, lighting concepts. She talked about creating spaces that felt both grand and intimate, about understanding the psychology of luxury travel, about the importance of every single detail from the door handles to the artwork in the hallways. And Yates listened. Not the polite, distracted listening she had experienced with other clients, but genuine engagement. He asked questions that showed he understood design on a fundamental level, challenged her choices in ways that made her defend her decisions with passion. When she finished, she realized her hands were trembling slightly. She had given everything she had. Yates stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. The afternoon sun cast his profile in sharp relief. "I have 3 other presentations scheduled this week," he said, and Dana felt her stomach drop. "But I do not need to see them. The project is yours if you want it." She blinked, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" He turned back to her, and there was something in his expression that was not quite professional anymore. "You understand what I am trying to build. More than that, you feel it. I can see it in the way you talk about spaces, about how people interact with their environment. I would be an idiot to let you walk out of here without securing your services." Dana stood, her legs suddenly unsteady. "Mr. Harrison, I do not know what to say." "Say yes," he replied, moving closer, "and call me Yates. We are going to be working closely together for the next 18 months. We might as well be on a first-name basis." She laughed, the sound bubbling up from relief and excitement and something else she could not quite name. "Yes, absolutely yes." They shook hands again, but this time his grip lingered just a fraction longer than necessary. "I should warn you," he said, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I am very hands-on with my projects. You will probably get tired of seeing me." "I think I can handle it," Dana said, matching his smile with one of her own. She had no idea how much those words would come to mean. Over the next 2 weeks, Dana quickly learned that Yates had not been exaggerating. He showed up at her studio 3 times in the first week alone, sometimes with legitimate questions about the design, sometimes just to see the progress. He brought coffee each time, somehow remembering that she took hers with oat milk and 1 sugar. They would stand at her drafting table, shoulders nearly touching as they debated tile patterns and color schemes. And Dana found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that had nothing to do with professional courtesy. On the 15th day after their first meeting, Yates arrived at her studio just as she was locking up for the evening. It was past 8, and the street was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic. "Working late again?" he asked, leaning against his car. It was not the sleek Mercedes she had expected, but a well-maintained vintage Bronco that looked like it had seen some adventures. "Says the man who sent me an email at 6 this morning," Dana countered, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "Fair point." He straightened, and she noticed he looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from carrying too much responsibility. "Have you eaten?" The question caught her off guard. "I was going to grab something at home. There is a small Italian place 2 blocks from here. Best carbonara in the city." He paused, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked uncertain. "Join me. We can talk about the lobby redesign, or not. We could just eat." Dana knew she should say no. This was her biggest client, and mixing business with anything personal was a recipe for disaster. But she was hungry, and he looked like he could use the company, and she found herself nodding before her rational brain could object. The restaurant was exactly as he described, a tiny place with checked tablecloths and walls covered in photographs of Italian countryside. The owner greeted Yates by name, ushering them to a corner booth with the familiarity of an old friend. "I take it you come here often," Dana said, scanning the menu. "My grandfather used to bring me here when I was a kid," Yates said, and there was a softness in his voice she had not heard before. "He started Harrison Global with nothing but a loan and a dream. He taught me that success means nothing if you forget where you came from." Dana set down her menu, intrigued. "Is that why you do what you do, building hotels?" "Partially." He poured them both water from the carafe on the table. "My grandfather believed that the spaces we inhabit shape who we become. He wanted to create places where people could experience beauty, luxury, comfort, where they could make memories." He met her eyes. "I think that is why your work spoke to me. You get that? You are not just designing rooms. You are designing experiences." The waiter arrived before Dana could respond, and they ordered, the conversation flowing into easier topics. She learned that Yates had studied architecture before switching to business, that he still sketched buildings in his spare time, that he had a younger sister who was a doctor in Seattle. He learned that Dana had grown up in a small town in Vermont, that she had put herself through design school working 3 jobs, that she still called her grandmother every Sunday without fail. When the food arrived, Dana took her first bite of carbonara and actually groaned. "Okay, you are not exaggerating. This is incredible." Yates grinned, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Told you." They stayed until the restaurant closed, talking and laughing like old friends rather than business associates. When Yates walked her to her car, the night air was cool and clear, the city lights reflecting off the clouds above. "Thank you for tonight," Dana said, unlocking her door. "I needed this more than I realized." "Me too," Yates admitted. He stood with his hands in his pockets, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Dana, I need to tell you something." Her heart started beating faster. "Okay. I did not ask you to dinner just to talk about the project." He took a step closer. "I asked because I have not been able to stop thinking about you since you walked into that conference room. And I know this is complicated because we are working together, and I do not want to make you uncomfortable, but I would regret it forever if I did not at least tell you that I would very much like to take you out on an actual date." Dana stared at him, her mind racing. Every professional instinct told her this was a bad idea, but her heart, that traitorous organ, was already saying yes. "I think that would be complicated," she said slowly. "Very complicated," he agreed, "and potentially a terrible idea. Probably the worst." She smiled, feeling reckless and alive in a way she had not in years. "Friday night," his answering smile was brilliant. "I will pick you up at 7. Friday night turned into Saturday morning breakfast, which turned into a walk through the botanical gardens where they talked for hours about everything and nothing. Sunday, Yates took her sailing on his boat, teaching her the basics while the sun painted the water gold. Monday, they met for lunch and ended up playing hooky from work, spending the afternoon in a used bookstore, reading passages to each other and arguing about authors. By the end of that first week of actually dating, Dana felt like she was falling off a cliff with no idea where she would land. Yates was unlike anyone she had ever been with. He was confident without being controlling, successful without being pretentious. He listened when she talked, really listened, remembering small details and bringing them up later. He made her laugh with dry humor and surprising goofiness. And when he kissed her goodnight on her doorstep after their 5th date, she felt it all the way to her toes. "I am moving very fast," he murmured against her lips, his hands cupped around her face. "Tell me to slow down if this is too much." "Do not you dare slow down," Dana whispered back, and pulled him in for another kiss. They managed to keep their relationship quiet for exactly 2 days, before Yates's assistant caught them kissing in his office and promptly burst into delighted laughter. After that, there seemed no point in hiding. The team working on the Meridian project took the news with varying degrees of surprise and approval, but no one seemed particularly scandalized. As Yates's project manager said, "Anyone with eyes could see the way you two looked at each other. We are just glad you finally did something about it." 3 weeks into their relationship, Dana met Yates's sister, Violet, who flew in from Seattle for the weekend. They met for brunch at a cafe near the waterfront, and Dana was nervous enough that she had changed outfits 4 times before settling on a simple dress and jacket. Violet turned out to be warm and funny, with the same amber eyes as her brother and a direct manner that reminded Dana of her own sister. "So you are the woman who has my brother acting like a lovesick teenager," she said, shaking Dana's hand. "I approve already." "Vi," Yates said, but he was smiling. "What? I am just stating facts." Violet sat down and immediately stole a piece of bread from Yates's plate. "He has been miserable and married to his work for years. It is nice to see him actually happy." Over mimosas and eggs Benedict, Violet regaled Dana with embarrassing stories from Yates's childhood, and Dana found herself relaxing, joining in the teasing. At one point, Yates caught her hand under the table, lacing their fingers together, and the simple gesture made her chest feel too small for her heart. Later, when Violet had left to catch her flight, Yates and Dana walked along the waterfront. The afternoon was perfect, warm without being hot, a light breeze coming off the water. "She really likes you," Yates said. "I could tell. I like her too." Dana leaned into his side and his arm came around her shoulders automatically. "Your family seems wonderful." "My parents are going to love you," he said, then paused. "I mean when you meet them, if you want to meet them. I am not assuming anything." Dana stopped walking, turning to face him. "Yates, I want to meet them. I want all of this. I know it has only been a few weeks, but I have never felt this way before. Like I found something I did not even know I was looking for." He cupped her face in his hands, his expression so tender it made her want to cry. "I feel the same way. Exactly the same way." They kissed there on the waterfront while joggers and families moved around them, and Dana felt the last of her reservations melt away. The fourth week was when things got intense. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made Dana realize this was not just a fling or a rebound or any of the other labels she had tried to apply to keep herself safe. This was real, deep, the kind of love that changed everything. They spent almost every evening together. Sometimes they worked side by side, Dana sketching designs while Yates reviewed contracts, comfortable in the shared silence. Other times they explored the city, trying new restaurants, catching late movies, dancing in his living room to old vinyl records. Yates cooked for her, surprising her with skills that seemed at odds with his corporate image. Dana brought him to her favorite art gallery and watched his face light up at a collection of architectural photographs. They talked about everything. Childhoods and dreams, fears and failures, the small moments that had shaped them into who they were. Yates told her about the pressure of living up to his grandfather's legacy, the weight of being responsible for thousands of employees. Dana shared her terror of failure, the imposter syndrome that still crept in during her darkest moments. "You are extraordinary," Yates said one night as they lay tangled together on his couch, a documentary playing unwatched on the television. "Do you know that? I am really not," Dana protested. "You are." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "You are brilliant and talented and kind. You work harder than anyone I know. You see beauty in everything. And somehow, impossibly, you chose me." "That was the easiest choice I ever made," Dana said honestly. On the 28th day since they had first met, Yates took Dana to see the Meridian site. Construction had not started yet, but the old building had been gutted, leaving behind the bones of what would become something magnificent. They walked through the empty shell, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. Dana pointed out where different elements of her design would go, getting animated as she described the flow of the lobby, the way light would interact with the materials she had chosen. Yates watched her with an expression that made her flush. "What?" she asked, self-conscious. "I love you," he said simply. Dana froze, her heart stuttering in her chest. They had been dancing around those words for days, the feeling heavy in every touch, every glance, but neither had said them out loud. "I know it is fast," Yates continued, moving closer. "I know people will say it is crazy to feel this much this quickly, but I am 34 years old, Dana. I have dated enough to know when something is different. You are different. This is different. I wake up thinking about you. I fall asleep with your voice in my head. Every good thing that happens, I want to tell you first. Every problem, I want to solve it with you beside me." He took her hands in his. "I love you completely, and I needed you to know that." Dana felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too, she whispered. So much it scares me. Me too, he admitted, pulling her into his arms. Me too. They stood there in the empty building, holding each other as the late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, and Dana thought this might be the happiest moment of her entire life. That evening, Yates made reservations at the restaurant where they had their first non-business meal together. Dana dressed carefully, choosing a deep blue dress that Yates had once said made her eyes look like the ocean. She felt nervous for reasons she could not quite name, a fluttering anticipation that had her checking her reflection 3 times before Yates picked her up. He looked devastating in a dark suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. When he saw her, his face softened in that way that still made her knees weak. "You are breathtaking," he said, kissing her softly. "You are not so bad yourself," she replied, straightening his collar unnecessarily just for an excuse to touch him. The restaurant was more crowded than last time, but their corner booth was waiting. They ordered wine and the same meals as before, laughing at their own predictability. The conversation flowed easily, as it always did, ranging from silly to serious and back again. Dana was halfway through her pasta when she noticed Yates had barely touched his food. He was watching her with an intensity that made her set down her fork. "What is it?" she asked. "You are being weird." "I am being weird," he agreed, then laughed, running a hand through his hair. "God, I had a whole speech planned. I have been practicing it all day." "Speech about what?" Dana asked, confused. Yates took a deep breath, then reached across the table to take her hand. "Dana, I know we have only known each other for 1 month, 30 days, 720 hours, and by every logical standard, what I am about to do is insane." Dana's heart started pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "But here is what I know," Yates continued, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. "I know that I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I know that every moment we are apart feels like wasted time. I know that when I picture my future, every single version of it has you in it." He slid out of the booth, and Dana realized with a jolt that he was kneeling beside the table. "I know that I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to build a life with you, a family, a future. I want every adventure and every quiet evening and every mundane Tuesday." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring that took her breath away. It was vintage, an emerald-cut diamond flanked by smaller stones, elegant and timeless. "Dana Zimmerman, will you marry me?" The restaurant had gone quiet around them, but Dana barely noticed. She was staring at Yates, at the vulnerability and hope and love in his eyes, and she realized that her answer had been written in her heart from the moment he had said her name in that conference room 1 month ago. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, yes, of course yes." The restaurant erupted in applause as Yates slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like joy and tears and promise. When they finally broke apart, Dana was laughing and crying at the same time. "We are completely insane," she said. "Completely," Yates agreed, grinning widely. "Do you care?" "Not even a little bit." They barely made it through dinner, too giddy and overwhelmed to focus on food. Back at Yates's apartment, they called their families. Dana's grandmother cried happy tears and said she knew from the moment Dana first mentioned Yates that he was special. Yates's parents, who were traveling in Europe, were thrilled and immediately started planning their return for engagement celebrations. Violet screamed so loudly through the phone that they had to hold it away from their ears. Later, curled up together in bed, Dana held her hand up to catch the light on her ring. "I cannot believe this is real," she murmured. "Believe it," Yates said, kissing her shoulder. "You are stuck with me now." "Good," Dana said, rolling over to face him. Because I was not planning on letting you go anyway. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of wedding planning and media attention. It turned out that a wealthy real estate developer getting engaged after a month-long courtship was newsworthy, and they fielded requests for interviews and features from multiple publications. They declined most of them, wanting to keep their relationship as private as possible, but agreed to one profile in a business magazine that focused on their professional collaboration as much as their personal story. Dana continued working on the Meridian project, now with the added complexity of being engaged to the owner. But their professional relationship remained solid, built on mutual respect and shared vision. If anything, their personal connection enhanced their work, allowing them to communicate more effectively and push each other creatively. They set a wedding date for 6 months away, wanting enough time to plan properly, but not so long that the wait felt interminable. Dana's best friend from design school, Clara, agreed to be her maid of honor and immediately threw herself into planning mode. Yates's college roommate, Marcus, flew in to celebrate the engagement and spent an entire evening telling Dana embarrassing stories that made Yates groan and her laugh until her sides hurt. 3 months after the engagement, they found a house together. It was a craftsman-style home in an older neighborhood, with original woodwork and a garden that had been neglected but showed promise. Dana fell in love with it immediately, already envisioning how they could restore it while adding modern conveniences. "It needs work," Yates said, ever practical. "It needs love," Dana countered. "We can give it that." They closed on the house 2 weeks later and spent their weekends stripping wallpaper, refinishing floors, and arguing good-naturedly about paint colors. Yates turned out to be surprisingly handy, and Dana loved watching him work, sleeves rolled up and a look of concentration on his face. They made love in empty rooms with drop cloths and paint cans around them, christening each space as they made it theirs. The Meridian project progressed beautifully. Dana's designs were coming to life under the skilled hands of craftsmen and contractors, and every site visit filled her with pride. Yates gave her free rein creatively while managing the business aspects, and their partnership became the talk of the industry. Other developers started approaching Dana for projects, and she found herself having to hire additional staff to keep up with demand. 4 months after the engagement, they traveled to Vermont, so Yates could meet Dana's extended family. Her parents had divorced when she was young, but they both attended the barbecue her uncle hosted, putting aside their differences for her happiness. Her grandmother, the matriarch of the family, took Yates aside for a private conversation that lasted nearly an hour. When they emerged, Yates looked slightly shell-shocked but pleased. "She is terrifying," he told Dana later. "I mean that as the highest compliment. What did she say to you?" Dana asked, curious. "She said that you are the most precious thing in her life, and if I ever do anything to hurt you, she knows people who know how to make a body disappear." He paused. "Then she said she can tell I love you deeply, and she gives us her blessing." Dana laughed, not entirely sure her grandmother had been joking about the first part. "That sounds like Graham." The wedding planning accelerated as the date approached. Dana and Clara spent hours poring over flowers and menus and seating charts. Yates handled the logistics, booking venues and coordinating with vendors with the same efficiency he brought to his business deals. They decided on a ceremony in a renovated warehouse that Dana had designed early in her career, wanting a space that represented where she had been and where she was going. 2 weeks before the wedding, the Meridian held its soft opening for industry insiders and press. Dana walked through the completed spaces feeling surreal. Her designs had been transformed into reality, every detail exactly as she had envisioned. The lobby took her breath away, with its blend of contemporary elegance and welcoming warmth. Guest rooms felt both luxurious and intimate. The rooftop bar offered panoramic city views that made people gasp. Yates found her standing alone in the ballroom, taking it all in. "What are you thinking?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "I am thinking about how different my life was a year ago," Dana said. "I was struggling to keep my business afloat, taking every project I could get, terrified I would fail." She turned to look at him. "And then I walked into a conference room and met you, and everything changed." "I am the one who got lucky," Yates said. "I was building hotels, making money, checking boxes, but I was not really living. You taught me how to do that again." They kissed there in the empty ballroom, and Dana felt the same electric connection that had sparked between them from the very beginning. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies and mild temperatures. Dana got ready surrounded by Clara and her cousins, sipping champagne and laughing at old stories. Her dress was simple but elegant, flowing silk that made her feel like herself elevated. When her father came to get her for the ceremony, he had tears in his eyes. "You look just like your mother did at your age," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am so proud of the woman you have become." "Thanks, Dad," Dana said, squeezing his hand. The ceremony was intimate despite the size of the space, with close friends and family filling the first several rows and the rest of the seats occupied by colleagues and business associates. But when Dana walked down the aisle and saw Yates waiting for her at the altar, everyone else disappeared. He looked incredible in his tuxedo, but it was his expression that made her breath catch. He was looking at her like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked, like she was his entire world contained in one person. And she knew her own face reflected the same overwhelming love. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising partnership and adventure, support and challenge, laughter and comfort. When Yates slid the wedding band onto her finger, his hand trembled slightly, and Dana felt tears slip down her cheeks. When the officiant pronounced them married and Yates kissed her, the room erupted in applause, but Dana was only aware of the man holding her, the one she had chosen and who had chosen her back. The reception was a blur of happiness. They danced their first dance to a song Yates had played for her during one of their early dates, swaying together while cameras flashed and friends cheered. They cut the cake without smashing it in each other's faces, two genuinely delighted to resort to pranks. They made their rounds to every table, thanking people for coming, accepting congratulations and well wishes. During a quiet moment when they had snuck away to a balcony for air, Yates pulled Dana close. "Hello, Mrs. Harrison," he said, trying out the name. "Hello, husband," Dana replied, the word feeling both foreign and perfect. "Any regrets?" he asked, though his tone was teasing. "Only that I did not meet you sooner," Dana said honestly. "And maybe that I did not eat more appetizers. I was too nervous." Yates laughed, that full-bodied sound she loved. "I will get you a plate, but first—" He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, until she was dizzy with it. "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," Dana whispered. "Thank you for being crazy enough to propose after 1 month." "Thank you for being crazy enough to say yes," he countered. They returned to the reception and danced and celebrated until late into the night. When they finally left, sparklers lighting their path to the vintage car Yates had rented for the occasion, Dana felt like she was floating. They drove to the airport, catching a red-eye flight to Italy for their honeymoon, neither of them able to stop smiling. The honeymoon was 2 weeks of pure magic. They explored Rome and Florence and Venice, eating too much pasta and drinking too much wine and making love in hotel rooms with views of ancient architecture. They took a cooking class in Tuscany and got flour everywhere. They rented a scooter on the Amalfi Coast and drove along winding roads with the sea sparkling below. They talked for hours and were comfortable in silence. They were tourists and lovers and best friends all at once. On their last night, sitting at a small restaurant overlooking the Mediterranean, Yates reached across the table to take Dana's hand. "I have been thinking," he said. "Dangerous," Dana teased. "I want to start a foundation," he continued, ignoring her joke. "For young designers and architects from underprivileged backgrounds. Scholarships, mentorship programs, resources. I have the money and the connections. You have the talent and the understanding of what it takes to make it in this industry. We could really make a difference together." Dana felt her eyes well up. "That is a beautiful idea. So you will do it with me?" Yates asked. "Of course I will," Dana said. "I will do anything with you." They returned home tanned and relaxed and more in love than ever. Real life settled back around them, but it felt different now, richer. They fell into routines that felt right, learning each other's quirks and rhythms. Yates made coffee every morning while Dana walked their dog, a rescue mutt they had adopted the week after they moved into the house. Dana cooked dinner while Yates set the table and told her about his day. They worked on the house together, slowly transforming it into their dream home. The foundation launched 6 months after their wedding with significant fanfare and support. Dana threw herself into the mentorship program, working with talented young designers who reminded her of herself at that age. Yates secured partnerships with major universities and firms, creating pathways for students who might otherwise never have had the opportunity. It became one of the most fulfilling aspects of both their lives. A year after their wedding, on a quiet Sunday morning, Dana woke to find Yates watching her sleep. "That is creepy," she mumbled, still half asleep. "You are beautiful," he said unapologetically. "I like looking at you." Dana stretched, pressing closer to him. "What time is it?" "Early," Yates said. "I have been thinking." "You think too much," Dana complained, but she was smiling. "I want to have a baby with you," Yates said, and Dana was suddenly wide awake. "What, a baby?" he repeated. "Maybe several babies eventually. I want to see what we create together beyond buildings and businesses. I want a family with you, Dana." Dana sat up, her heart racing. They had talked about children in abstract terms, someday plans, but this felt immediate and real. "Are you sure?" "I am completely sure," Yates said, sitting up beside her. "But only if you want it to. There is no pressure. I just wanted you to know where my head is." Dana thought about it, picturing a child with Yates's amber eyes and her smile, a house filled with laughter and chaos and love. "I want that too," she said slowly. "I really want that." Yates grinned, pulling her into a kiss that quickly deepened into something more. "Should we start trying?" he murmured against her lips. "I suppose we could practice," Dana agreed, laughing as he rolled her beneath him. 3 months later, Dana took a pregnancy test on a random Tuesday morning and stared at the positive result with shaking hands. She had suspected for a few days, but had been too nervous to confirm. Now, looking at the evidence, she felt a rush of joy so intense it made her dizzy. She wanted to tell Yates immediately, but he was in meetings all day. Instead, she went to the baby store and bought the tiniest pair of shoes she could find, impossibly small sneakers that made her tear up in the middle of the store. That evening, she made Yates's favorite dinner and waited nervously for him to come home. When he walked through the door, he immediately knew something was different. "What is going on?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. "I have something to show you," Dana said, pulling out the little shoebox she had hidden behind a vase. Yates opened it slowly, his face going blank with shock when he saw the shoes. "Dana, are you serious?" "We are having a baby," she said, the words feeling surreal and wonderful. Yates dropped the box and crossed to her in 2 strides, picking her up and spinning her around despite her laughing protests. When he set her down, his face was wet with tears. "We are having a baby," he repeated, like he needed to say it out loud to believe it. "We are having a baby," Dana confirmed, crying too now. They held each other in the kitchen, overwhelmed and ecstatic, already imagining the future that was taking shape inside her. The pregnancy was relatively smooth, though Dana spent the first trimester exhausted and nauseous. Yates was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly making sure she was comfortable and fed and rested. They found out at 20 weeks that they were having a boy, and Yates immediately started planning a nursery. Dana continued working, scaling back her hours but remaining involved in her projects. Her team stepped up beautifully, and she found herself able to delegate in ways she never had before. It was hard letting go of some control, but motherhood was teaching her that lesson before the baby even arrived. They took parenting classes and toured the hospital and argued good-naturedly about names. Yates wanted something traditional while Dana preferred more unique options. They finally compromised on Daniel, a classic name that felt right the moment they said it out loud. Daniel Yates Harrison was born on a snowy February morning after 14 hours of labor. He came into the world screaming, healthy and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his father's amber eyes. When the nurse placed him in Dana's arms, she felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. Yates sat beside the hospital bed, one arm around Dana and one finger clutched in his son's tiny fist, and cried openly. "Thank you," he kept saying. "Thank you for him, for this, for everything." "Thank you," Dana whispered back, exhausted and elated and so full of love she thought she might burst. The first few months of parenthood were harder than either had anticipated. Sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, and the constant worry that they were doing everything wrong. But there were also perfect moments, quiet 3 a.m. feedings when it was just the three of them in the world, Daniel's first smile, the way he calmed instantly when Yates sang to him in his deep voice. They learned to function on minimal sleep and cold coffee. They figured out how to work as a team, trading off responsibilities and supporting each other through the hard moments. Yates took paternity leave and was hands-on in every way, changing diapers and doing midnight feedings and walking Daniel around the house when he would not settle. On a warm spring evening when Daniel was 4 months old, Dana stood in the nursery doorway watching Yates rock their son to sleep. The sight made her chest ache with love, this strong, successful man reduced to putty by an infant. As if sensing her presence, Yates looked up and met her eyes. The expression on his face was soft, vulnerable, and she was struck by how much their lives had changed in less than 2 years. From strangers in a conference room to this, a family, a life built on love and trust and partnership. Later, after Daniel was asleep and they had collapsed onto the couch together, Yates pulled Dana close. "Do you ever think about how crazy this all is?" he asked. "All the time," Dana admitted. "Sometimes I still cannot believe you proposed after 1 month." "Best decision I ever made," Yates said firmly. "I knew then what I know now. You were it for me. You are it for me." "You are it for me too," Dana said, tilting her face up to kiss him. "I never expected the whirlwind would wind into forever." "Forever," Yates agreed, the word a promise and a declaration. "That is exactly what this is." They sat there in their living room, the house quiet around them, their son sleeping peacefully down the hall. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, but inside they had created something steady and true. A love story that had started fast and burned bright and settled into something even better, something lasting. Dana thought about the woman she had been, walking into that conference room with her portfolio and her dreams, and no idea that her entire life was about to change. She thought about the risks they had taken, the leap of faith required to say yes to a proposal after 30 days, the courage needed to build a life with someone so quickly. But looking at Yates, at the man who had become her husband, her partner, the father of her child, she knew she would make the same choice 1,000 times over. Some people spent years finding what they had discovered in moments. Some loves were slow and steady while others were forest fires. Theirs had been a whirlwind from the start, fast and intense and all-consuming. But it had wound into something deeper than passion, stronger than attraction. It had become the foundation of everything, the center around which their lives orbited. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "Happy endings," Dana said, "and how they are really just beginnings." "I like that," Yates murmured, pulling her closer. "So what is our next beginning?" Dana smiled, resting her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her palm. "I guess we will figure it out together. That seems to be what we do best." "Together," Yates agreed, and in that simple word was everything they had built and everything they still had to build. A marriage that started in a month and would last a lifetime. A family that would grow and change. A love that had been instantaneous and impossible and absolutely real. As they sat there in the quiet house, Dana felt profoundly grateful for every impulsive decision, every risk taken, every moment of reckless certainty that had led them here. She had said yes to a proposal after 1 month, and in doing so, had said yes to everything that followed. The whirlwind had wound into forever, exactly as it was always meant to.